Welcome to the Osha Update, sponsored by Wisconsin Damage Prevention Council. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank some prime players in this endeavor. We Energy, this is a We Energy training facility. We also have KS Energy Services and Valley Hydro Excavating that'll be demonstrating locate and the best practices to use while you're performing locating operations. Today's topics that we're going to cover are basics in excavation safety, frequently cited standards or violations that OSHA finds, what's new at OSHA for fiscal year 2011, and the new OSHA crane standard. We're going to summarize all this with best practices and the best practices that operators ought to use when they're performing excavation operations in the state of Wisconsin. We're aware that there's a number of public sector employees that attend these meetings, and we want to make you aware of the information concerning who enforces and regulates public sector safety in the state of Wisconsin. The actual regulation is COM 32. They actually have adopted the OSHA 2003 standards.
As part of this meeting today, everyone will have the opportunity to receive an excavation safety handout, and you'll be able to take this with you when you go, and it has a lot of helpful information. In particular, underground installation information, hand digging and best practices for hand digging, the requirements for competent person, access and egress from excavations, and the requirements associated with all means of protecting employees in the excavation, soil pile distances, inspections of excavations, and so on. On the back side of this handout, there's also a template that you can use to inspect your excavations when you're actually conducting the work on site. I encourage everyone here today to make it a point to grab one of those before you leave. Frequently cited violations in underground construction. The most frequently cited violations by federal OSHA relating to underground construction. Number one, no cave-in protection or no protection systems for employees or the protection of employees while they're working in excavations. Number two is no means of egress. Everyone knows there's a requirement that there's a means of egress within 25 feet of any employee working in an excavation. Soil piles is number three most cited standard, and soil pile distances are required to be a minimum of 2 feet from the edge of any excavation. Hard hats and overhead protection while working in excavations, in an excavation and around equipment or any other overhead hazard is a requirement of the federal standards, and employers should ensure their employees wear hard hats 100% of the time. Also, number five is the usage of ladders in and around excavations.
I'd like to take the opportunity to demonstrate some of the basics in excavation safety. At any time when you have an excavation that's 4 feet deep or greater, you need a good sound means of entrance or egress from the excavation located every 25 feet along the excavation. A ladder is a wonderful means of egress from an excavation. In addition to egress, anytime that you have an excavation that's more than 5 feet deep, you need to have protective systems for employees' protection in the event of a cave-in and protection from cave-ins while they're working in the excavation. One of the most preferred method, and the best method actually, is the trench box. A trench box is demonstrated right here and should be located in an excavation that's greater than 5 feet for the employee's protection. There's many other methods, shoring, sloping, and so on, depending on the classification of the soil that's being excavated. There are many tools that the competent person can utilize to classify soil. I have a couple of them here, the pentrometer and the torvain. There's three types of classification, type C, type B, and type A. In addition to that, visual inspection of the soil is another good method. The trench box there should be a minimum of 18 inches above the ground for the top of the trench box, and no more than 2 feet should the trench box be above the bottom of the trench for the protection of cave-in underneath the box. And employees should remain in the box at all times while they're performing work, and the box should never be moved with an employee in the box. Also, I want to mention that any excavation that's greater than 20 feet deep, you need to have it certified by a professional engineer before any employee enters the excavation.
OSHA recently promulgated a new standard involving cranes and crane activities in construction. Ground conditions must be certified by the controlling contractor or entity on the construction site. This is paramount before setting the crane. Assembly and disassembly of the crane must be conducted by qualified parties, individuals that are qualified and trained for those types of operations. The distance that cranes can operate in relation to power lines has also been increased from 10 feet to 20 feet. Operators will be required to be certified before they can operate any cranes within federal OSHA jurisdiction. I recommend that employers and operators take the opportunity to find out as much information as you can about the requirements for operator certification. The new standard also requires specific training for employees that will be involved in signaling during lifting operations. There is also a requirement for the daily inspection of all crane operations and activities, in addition to the requirement for periodic inspections. The new standard is specific for the operation of cranes, meaning that bulldozers, other types of front-end loaders, excavation equipment, skid steers, and so on are actually exempt from the new standard, even if that equipment is being used to lift material, for instance, the bucket of a bulldozer. Coming in 2011, most importantly, would be the Illness and Injury Prevention Program. This is nothing new. In 1989, OSHA published guidelines for employers to use for an effective safety and health management system. OSHA is looking at an opportunity to actually promulgate a standard, making that a requirement. There are many emphasis programs associated with federal OSHA, and many emphasis programs are continuing in 2011. Most importantly is the National Emphasis Program for Trenching and Excavation. We're also continuing the Fall Emphasis Program and the requirement for employees to have fall protection in the construction industry. Silica and lead emphasis programs are continuing. Anytime you're cutting concrete piping, and anything that contains silica or potentially contains silica or sand, wet cutting methods is paramount. I'd like to take the opportunity to cover some of the best practices. In every state in the United States, there's a requirement for a one-call facility locate request.
The best practice that we're going to demonstrate now is white lining. Before the locate arrives on site to locate the utilities, you want to take the opportunity to identify where the actual excavation is going to be on the ground. You do that with a method called white lining and with white paint. It saves time when the locate gets here, and there's no misunderstanding of exactly where the excavation is going to be located.
While conducting trenching operations, it's important for the operators, the owners of the project, and the utility companies to have a pre-excavation meeting. This gives everybody an opportunity to discuss exactly what's going to take place during the operation.
The best practice that we're going to demonstrate here is digging within the tolerance zone. Anytime there's been a locate identified and you need to dig within 18 inches of that utility, you need to use a non-destructive method, not only for the employee's protection, but to ensure that you don't damage the utility itself. One of the best methods to use for that is hydro excavation. You can actually dig up to approximately 35 feet utilizing this method. The best practice that we're going to demonstrate here is hand digging. When an employee conducts hand digging, it's typically within 18 inches of the utility. You use shovels to locate the utility. The best preferred method is soft digging, and that's from the side. In addition to the requirement for soft digging, the employee should wear the proper personal protective equipment. Electrically rated gloves for the type of utility or the energy associated with the utility that you're trying to locate. Electrically rated boots, or protective boots. Of course, the hard hat for overhead protection. And there's different types of shovels that you could use.
During your trenching operation, in the event of you damaging a utility, if it's an emergency situation, you would immediately contact 911. And then, as soon as practical, contact the owner of the utility and report the damage to the owner. In closing, I'd like to thank the Wisconsin Damage Prevention Council. Also to Time Warner, We Energies, KS Energies, and Valley Hydro Excavating for their participation in making this a successful endeavor.